Guys, if you see me, if you hear me, give me some apples and some milk. Guys, I was late. Yes, I was late. And I was upstairs having a conversation with my wife. And I was like, What time is it, by the way?" She's like, "It's 1:02." And I was like, "It's 1:02?" And my daughter's like, "You got to do Animal Farm." I came downstairs and, you guys all have my phone number. Why? How dare you guys not call me? You guys didn't send me any alerts. Nobody emailed me. I feel like who's the horse? Molly. I feel like Molly, always late to the meetings. Okay, so I'm audible. Crystal Carroll said, "Hey, the man himself. What's going on, guys? We're at 41 people. Um, are any of you guys upset or disturbed or offended at my tardiness? I think I was like 2 minutes late. I was maybe 2 or 3 minutes late. Tardiness is atrocious. I'm gonna move this over real quick before we get started so that I can have this the chat on the main screen. Grumpy says, "How dare you?" Guys, do you believe that my plant here is real? Tell me in the chat. Is it clearly fake? I got a no. I got a yes. Okie doke, guys. We are in chapter 5. Chapter 5 of Animal Farm, and um, I believe that there should be no interruptions, right? I've turned monetization off. And so, because monetization is off, if you have the ability, leave any kind of super chat, definitely become a member. Anything, everything helps the channel. We're going to be doing this book club. This is just the first of many books. I think the vote was like overwhelming that we're going to be doing 1984 by George Orwell following Animal Farm. We're going into some dystopian literature. You guys ready for that? I think it should be good. So, um, just to start, before we go into chapter 5 of Animal Farm, I wanted to give a recap of chapter 4. Lauren, thank you very much. Happy Friday to you too. Apples and milk. Thanks so much for the super chat. Any questions about the chapter? Anything you want us all to know about the chapter? Definitely hit the super chat button and leave a message. We're going to get all of those at the end. So for a recap of chapter 4, the spread of the rebellion, right? That's the number one thing that we should remember from chapter 4 is that the news of the rebellion is beginning to spread throughout the county of what happened at the manor farm, now named Animal Farm. And at least me, I was a little bit worried. Like, is the real news spreading? We had a conversation about fake news, or what the Nazis called Lügenpresse, the lying press. I wonder, the pigeons that were sent out from the Animal Farm, were they telling people the whole story? The fact that apples and milk had been like completely taken by the pigs, the fact that labor was twice as hard, or are they just being given this utopian myth encapsulated by that song, Beast of England? So that's the number one thing you need to remember about chapter 4. Number 2 is the Battle of Cowshed. So uh, Mr. Jones, along with his two farmer buddies, who are meant to represent both Nazi Germany and the capitalistic West, go back to the manor farm and try to take it back. Snowball has been reading Julius Caesar. Snowball the pig. He's actually been inside the farmhouse and he picked up a whole bunch of books. He read this book, Julius Caesar, and he actually embodied it. We talked about the difference between how Snowball read Julius Caesar and the purpose for which he was reading it, and the purpose for which Jones may have read it, which is just kind of this, you know, uh, romantic kind of being in touch with history just to kind of make yourself a little smarter. Snowball was using this strategically, and the difference was clear. We also kind of got a sense of Snowball's heroism. He actually put himself in harm's way and got injured. And the last thing to remember about chapter 4 before we move into chapter 5 is that We have the first martyr. There was a sheep that died, and we had the conversation about how martyrdom, how death for a cause can actually be used as a manipulation tool, right? And one more thing that you kind of have to remember about chapter 4 before we move into chapter 5. We had a conversation about medals and decorations, right? A lot of these animals that that fought in the Battle of Cowshed, um, they are decorated with medals, and we talked about, wow, what does that mean? I mean, even in today's day and age, where people go to war. My brother was an airborne instructor. He was deployed 4 or 5 times. He had to do some brutal things, some violent things in foreign countries, and so he has all these military decorations. And it's like, what does it mean that we put shiny objects on people for going and doing our violent bidding, right? And so, some interesting conversations there. Going into chapter 5, Ginny, 1984, let's go. Absolutely. Yeah, this looks like that's going to be next for sure. So, chapter 5, are we all ready? Am I still audible? Hit me with a thumbs up or an apple or some milk. See, lad, I see you. Appreciate you. Yep, we're still audible. Just got to kind of check. My internet does get kind of wonky here, guys. So, chapter 5, as winter drew on, Molly became more and more troublesome. She was late for work every morning and excused herself by saying that she had overslept. And she complained of mysterious pains, although her appetite was excellent. On every kind of pretext, she would run away from work and go to the drinking pool, where she would stand foolishly gazing at her own reflection in the water. Guys, something to think about with Molly, the horse, staring at her reflection in the mirror, in the water, right? The first thing that our minds go to is that, okay, well, Molly's also, she's always been kind of a narcissist, right? She's the horse that kind of wants the ribbons in her hair. She wants, she's thought of as beautiful by Mr. Jones, right? She's just kind of anxious for this old lavish lifestyle that she lived. And that might be a part of the shallow reading. And by saying shallow, I don't mean that it's incorrect. I just mean that it's kind of surface level. But what does it deeply mean, do you think, that Molly is looking at her own reflection obsessively? Isn't it true that the animals on Animal Farm are kind of losing their original identity? Aren't they doing work that the farmers used to do? Aren't they being treated, I mean, more intensely in terms of labor than they even were before? They can't have apples anymore. They can't have milk anymore. All of that belongs to the pigs. So maybe it isn't as shallow as we immediately think. Molly is looking at her reflection in the water, wondering where her identity is going. Right. So it's a little bit deeper than just narcissism, even though that plays a part and that's kind of a part of Molly's history. Right. But there were also rumors of something more serious. One day, as Molly strolled blithely into the yard, flirting her long tail and chewing at a stalk of hay, Clover took her aside. "Molly," she said, "I have something very serious to say to you. This morning I saw you looking over the hedge that divides Animal Farm from Foxwood. One of Mr. Pilkington's men was standing on the other side of the hedge, and I was a long way away. But I almost certain I saw this. He was talking to you, and you were allowing him to stroke your nose. What does that mean, Molly?" Here's something interesting about the Russian Revolution. As a matter of fact, you know what? With this chapter, I'm actually going to leave that until we get a couple of paragraphs down, and I'm going to bring it up here. Um, but it's very interesting that uh, someone who is dedicated to the cause of revolution is watching you act in the way you used to behave, right? Watching a little bit of the genuine you pop out. And maybe this is one of the reasons that 1984 is such a perfect segue from this book. It's almost like 1984 is a perfect continuation of Animal Farm in a sense, because you're getting a little big brotherish, right? Where you now have Clover talking to Molly and saying, "Hey, I'm kind of noticing that you're not as loyal as the rest of us. What's kind of going on with you?" Anyway, uh, she says, I saw this. I was a long way away, but I'm almost certain I saw this. He was talking to you and you were allowing him to stroke your nose. What does that mean, Molly?" "He didn't," she said. "I wasn't. It isn't true," cried Molly, beginning to prance about and paw the ground. "Molly, look me in the face. Do you give me your word of honor that man was not stroking your nose?" Guys, when Clover says look me in the face, it is more difficult to lie face to face. Why is it more difficult to lie when I'm looking in your eyes? Guys, our metacognition is only a small percentage of our cognition. By metacognition, I mean thinking about your thoughts, spotlight awareness, right? Most of our awareness, the biggest capacity for our awareness is floodlight awareness, right? And what you're aware of in the floodlight causes your intuition to speak. So when you are looking at me, say you're standing right in front of me, it's more difficult to lie face to face because now, in addition to remembering my lie, I have to gauge the look on your face to make sure you're still buying it. Are you buying it? Do I need to adjust this? Is my body language okay? How is their body language in response to my lies? Right. So when Clover says, look me in the eyes, it's like, give me open, curious attention there so I can tell if you're, really being honest with me here. Anyway, Molly says, it isn't true. It isn't true, repeated Molly. But she could not look Clover in the face. And the next moment, she took to her heels and galloped away into the field. You know what's interesting? Um, People don't want to leave prison sometimes. You guys remember Shawshank Redemption? I think there was somebody who was leaving prison in Shawshank, and they ended up hanging themselves because their sense of identity was all wrapped up. There's people who are like in prison; they're important. They know what their job is. Maybe they've been the cook in prison for like decades, and as a cook, they kind of can get favors from other inmates. They they get a relationship with the guards. They have some kind of relationship with they understand in cognitive science, they say what's necessary for meaning in life is a narrative order, a nomological order, a the flow state, and a normative order. So the narrative order is what part you play in the grander narrative, right? And without that narrative structure, it's very, very difficult to find meaning in life. And so, uh, Molly had that narrative structure back in the days of the manor farm, right? She wasn't just a number. She wasn't just a workhorse. Like she had some sense of importance. She knew her place in the universe. And we're all searching for that to a degree. "It isn't true," repeated Molly. But she could not look Clover in the face, and the next moment she took to her heels and galloped away into the field. A thought struck Clover. Without saying anything to the others, she went to Molly's stall and turned over the straw with her hoof. Hidden under the straw was a little pile of lump sugar and several bunches of ribbon of different colors. Hidden under the straw was a little pile of lump sugar and several bunches of ribbons of different colors. 3 days later, Molly disappeared. For some weeks, nothing was known of her whereabouts. Then the pigeons reported that they had seen her on the other side of Willingdon. She was between the shafts of a smart dog cart painted red and black, which was standing outside a public house. A fat, red-faced man in check breeches and gaiters, who looked like a publican, was stroking her nose and feeding her with sugar. Her coat was newly clipped, and she wore a scarlet ribbon around her forelock. She appeared to be enjoying herself, so the pigeon said. None of the animals ever mentioned Molly again. A lot of important things here. First of all, who gave the pigeons the right to spy? Was this voted on? I mean, the pigeons have become like this spy system where if you leave the farm, the pigeons are reporting to some higher group why that is, right? You're being surveilled at this point, right? And you see how things just slowly become dark. There are certain things, guys, that the narrator doesn't even tell you about. It's like, yeah, now at this point of the evolution of this system, now, surveillance is a part of it. They know where you are and they report back to somebody high in the system. This was never introduced in animalism or in the Seven Laws or in Beasts of England or in old majors' speeches. Nowhere did it mention that you're going to be surveilled and that your whereabouts are going to be automatically told to the pigs. Interesting. But another thing, they never saw, no one ever mentioned Molly again. So the question there is why? Why is Molly never spoken about again? Well, I mean, one thing you could say is that there was genuine confusion about the situation with Molly. I mean, the animals are being called stupid, not only by the narrator, but that's the assumption of the pigs. But another reason that may be that Molly isn't spoken about again, guys, is because this is how it always is with tyrannical regimes. No matter how you feel, no matter what's truly going on in the inside, they are going to tell you that you're living in a utopia. It's very scary that there are people who have escaped North Korea and they say that there is no word for friendship in North Korea. The word is comrade because everything you do is for the dictator. Everything you do is for the dictator. There's no word for depression in North Korea because there's no such thing as depression in the communist utopia. It's real. you know, this is very frightening stuff, right? But it's interesting. No one ever talks about Mali again. It's almost like you start to see the beginning of historical revisionism, where it's like let's just blot this out of history. Let's just pretend that this didn't happen. This is one of the reasons that even as a black man in America, I don't want the monuments removed of the slave masters and all that. I don't want any of those monuments destroyed. I want to be able to look at that and see, it's like, how far have we come? I don't want us to remember the signs of that history necessarily, but that gets into something else. In January, they came bitterly hard weather. The earth was like iron, and nothing could be done in the fields. Many meetings were held in the big barn, and the pigs occupied themselves with planning out the work of the coming season. It had come to be accepted that the pigs, who were manifestly cleverer than the other animals, should decide all questions of farm policy, though their decisions had to be ratified by a majority vote. This arrangement would have worked well if it had not been for the disputes between Snowball and Napoleon. These two disagreed at every point where disagreement was possible. Guys, they disagree wherever disagreement is possible. Um, and we've said before, and I think that it bears repeating, if only for the fact that we need to make these principles muscle memory. When you're reading someone like George Orwell, you want to develop chapter by chapter an ecology of practices to make the lessons life applicable, right? Um, and so when people are disagreeing over everything, they are not guided by the cooperative principle. They are guided by the principles of combat. There's conflict at the top, right? And it's a clear power struggle, right? Um, and maybe it's useful for the illusion of choice. I mean, think about our own politics. I mean, I happen to be an American, and sometimes when I'm watching two politicians go at it from the other side, I'm like, is this just about the illusion of choice? Right? It seems like they're arguing over things sometimes that are so trivial that it's almost just like you want us to have you want us to live under the illusion that there's still a difference between but certain politicians I think have a spirit of America left in them, but sometimes it's just no choice. Sometimes they're fighting just to be fighting. Um, but if one of them suggested sowing bigger acreage for barley, the other was certain to demand a bigger acreage of oats. And if one of them said that such and such a field was just right for cabbages, the other would declare that it was useless for anything except roots. Each had his own following, and there were some violent debates. Guys, I'm sorry for stopping again here, but I think I feel uh, I feel that it's important to go over the cooperative principle, right? Whenever you want to display to someone that you're genuinely trying to understand them, you should enact the maxims of the cooperative principle. H.P. Grice in linguistics, he said, whenever you're trying to cooperate with somebody, make sure you don't violate the maxim of quality, the maxim of quantity, the maxim of relevance, and the maxim of manner. Not violating the maxim of quantity means only speak so much as you need to. Don't overtalk, right? When you overtalk, then people is like, I'm having trouble following you, right? And then don't undertalk, because if you say too little, then people don't know what you're talking. So that's the maxim of quantity. The maxim of quality means be honest. And as a listener, assume that the person talking is trying to be honest until you get evidence to the contrary, right? And then the maxim of manner means to don't use flowery words if you don't have to, right? Don't just try to overwhelm people with jargon. Um, and uh, and then the maxim of relevance, meaning remain relevant, stay on topic, and understand. The maxim of relevance too also means understand that the person you're talking to is on the same team as you are, right? And so when you're having a conversation, especially if it's an argument, man, if you enact those four maxims of the cooperative principle, it helps you actually learn a lot from the people that you're talking to and not get into combat from which nobody is learning anything. You know so just wanted to leave that there. Each had his own following, and there were some violent debates. At the meetings, Snowball often won over the majority by his brilliant speeches. But Napoleon was better at canvassing support for himself in between times. Hmm. So we have Snowball, who, remember, Snowball represents Trotsky in the grand scheme of things, right? Remember, all of these pigs, all of the animals are symbolic of something in the Russian Revolution. So Snowball represents Trotsky, the one who has these brilliant speeches and who can win over the people with his words. But it says regarding Napoleon was better at canvassing support for himself in between times. What does that mean? He wants to canvass support in secret. Remember, Napoleon was the one who immediately took those puppies. Remember, the dog had puppies, and Napoleon took them to a secret place and said, "Don't worry, I'll raise them. I'll teach them. I'm of course the brains. I'm the smartest one. You should be happy. I don't. It's not that I want to take them. I don't want to raise them. That's difficulty for me. I'll just take them and I'll raise them and I'll do you this service because I'm so smart." That's Napoleon. He likes to operate in secret. Napoleon was especially successful with the sheep. Of late, the sheeps had taken to bleating 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, both in and out of season, and they often interrupted the meeting with this. Guys, there's a book by Michel Foucault called The Madness of Crowds. And crowds can be very, very dumb, even though the individuals in those crowds are smart, right? The crowd just becomes this hive mind that just yells out this thing, this symbolic thing that this giant hive mind represents, right? Um, and they're interrupting the meetings with the lowest, most shallow rendering of what everyone understands, right? Um, and it's so we get lost in the weeds when we miss the nuance, right? Have you ever had an argument with a person I did a lot of professional debates, and I used to have arguments with people, and they would say, "Yes or no." No, it's a yes or no answer. It's a yes or no question. Yeah, just yes or no. I was like, no, a lot of things are nuanced. You can't just get the simple version of complex ideas, right? But these pigs, sorry, these sheep, they just interrupt. They interrupt the speeches with saying, four legs good, two legs bad, both in and out of season. And they often interrupt the meeting with this. It was noticed that they were especially liable to break into four legs good, two legs bad at crucial moments in Snowball's speeches. So think about this. You have this tactician, Napoleon, who likes to operate in secret, and he especially has won over the sheep. And now you have the sheep interrupting with this vague nonsense when Snowball is trying to speak. You think Napoleon had anything to do with that? Napoleon is in secret saying to the sheep, "Hey, when Snowball, when that idiot gets up there and starts talking, I just want you guys to start yelling, four legs good, two legs bad, right? Interrupting his speech." So Napoleon is acting kind of shady in his desire for power. Um, Snowball had made a close study of some back numbers of the farmer and stock breeder, which he had found in the farmhouse, and was full of plans for innovations and improvements. He talked learnedly about field drains, silage, and basic slag, and had worked out a complicated scheme for all the animals to drop their dung directly in the fields, at a different spot every day to save the labor of cartage. Napoleon produced no schemes of his own, but said quietly that Snowball would come to nothing, that Snowball's scheme would come to nothing, and seemed to be biding his time. But of all their controversies, none was so bitter as the one that took place over the windmill. In the long pasture, not far from the farm buildings, there was a small knoll which was the highest point on the farm. After surveying the ground, Snowball declared that this was just the place for a windmill, which could be made to operate a dynamo and supply the farm with electrical power. This would light the stalls and warm them in winter, and would also run a circular saw, a chaff cutter, a mangle slicer, and an electric milking machine. The animals had never heard of anything of this kind before, for the farm was an old fashioned one, and had only the most primitive machinery. And they listened in astonishment while Snowball conjured up pictures of fantastic machines, which would do their work for them while they grazed at their ease in the fields, or improved their minds with reading and conversation. So imagine this, guys. Snowball is Snowball is actually he's not only put himself in harm's way, right? Because remember, last chapter, we talked about plausibility. We've actually been talking about that chapter by chapter. In order to establish that an idea is plausible, you need converging lines of evidence and multi aptness. We now have converging lines of evidence that Snowball is trying to do the right thing, and that he's not completely corrupted by power, right? One of those lines of evidence is that he threw himself in front of a gun and actually took a wound, right? Willingness to do that shows bravery and shows self sacrifice. And then, secondly, he's telling the entire farm about the importance of them actually learning to read. He's trying to kind of improve their minds. So there's converging lines of evidence and multi-aptness. Multi-aptness just means it solves multiple problems, right? This windmill will solve multiple problems. Multiple animals knowing how to read is going to solve multiple problems for the revolution. So it doesn't mean that Snowball's intentions are entirely good, but it is at least plausible at this point, guys, that that Snowball has some good intentions here. Within a few weeks, Snowball's plans for the windmill were fully worked out. The mechanical details came mostly from 3 books, which had belonged to Mr. Jones' 1,000 useful things to do about the house. Every man his own bricklayer, and electricity for beginners. Snowball used as his study, Snowball used as his study a shed which had once been used for incubators and had a smooth wooden floor suitable for drawing on. He was closeted there for hours at a time, with his books held open by a stone and with a piece of chalk gripped between his knuckles, the knuckles of his trotter. He would move rapidly to and fro, drawing in line after line and uttering little whimpers of excitement. This, to me, is the third line of evidence that Snowball is on the right side of this. He's totally in the flow state, right? He's in the flow state over the idea of helping the farm, helping the animals in this revolution. As he's drawing these plans, you hear little whimpers of excitement in his voice. And guys, the flow state, a lot of people have tried to define the flow state. Some people have said the flow state is when maximum effort reaches maximum effortlessness. I was like, well, that's not a helpful definition. But the flow state is kind of like Michael Jordan jumping from the 3 point line, moving as gracefully as a swan, but sweating. It's like he's completely in flow. The best definition of the flow state that I've come across is this: when the challenge far exceeds your competency, that's stress. When your competency far exceeds the challenge, that's boredom, right? But when your competency is barely, barely, barely above the challenge, that's the flow state. And we all love that experience. It's the reason video games are so addictive, right? Is because on level one, you barely have enough competence to reach level two. But what you learned in level one gives you the competence to barely get to level three. And then what you learned in level two barely gets you the competence to get to level four. And that flow state, that cascade of insights, you're just under a cascade of insights at that point. And it feels wonderful. It's the reason video games are so addictive, right? So he is in flow. Snowball is in the flow state right now, coming up with these plans, hence the little whimpers of excitement as he's doing this. Gradually, the plans grow into a complicated mass of cranks and cogwheels, covering more than half the floor, which the other animals found completely unintelligible, but very impressive. All of them came to look at Snowball's drawings at least once a day. Even the hens and ducks came, and were at pains not to tread on the chalk marks. Only Napoleon held aloof. He had declared himself against the windmill from the start. Guys, that is the most important line in this chapter because of the depth of the meaning in it. I'm going to read that line again. Napoleon had declared himself against the windmill from the start. Now, if you've been following along, you know that a lot of times with Orwell, there's a narrow rendering and then there's a deep meaning, right? It's the wisdom of God to conceal a matter, the wisdom of kings to search it out. We're the kings, right? He had declared himself against the windmill from the beginning, right? What does the windmill represent? What does the windmill represent? What happens to the farm if the windmill is actually built and they all have electricity and now they're warm in the winter and they can get to the business of learning to read and becoming more intelligent? What is the windmill represents the prosperity of the animals. That's what the windmill represents. So listen to that again. Napoleon had declared himself against the windmill from the start, meaning from the very beginning. As soon as old Major died, Napoleon was against the windmill, right? The windmill is a symbol of something deeper than the windmill, right? The windmill is a symbol of the prosperity of the animals. That's what Napoleon is against because he wants to take power for himself, right? Watch out for the people in your life that are against the windmill. Does that make sense? Very, very powerful and poignant sentence there. One day, however, he arrived unexpectedly to examine the plans. He walked heavily round the shed, looked closely at every detail of the plans, and snuffed at them once or twice, then stood for a little while contemplating them out of the corner of his eye. Then suddenly he lifted his leg, urinated over the plans, and walked out without uttering a word. Right? Him urinating over these plans just this should have signaled danger to someone as smart as Snowball. I mean, if you piss on something, that kind of goes beyond, right? If you show me your blueprint and I piss on it, that's a different level of disgust. Uh, the whole farm was deeply divided on the subject of the windmill. Stewart said he was peed off. Yeah, he was pissed off. Uh, the whole farm was deeply divided on the subject of the windmill. Snowball did not deny that to build it would be a difficult business. Stone would have to be quarried and built up into walls. Then the sails would have to be made, and after that, there would be need for dynamos and cables. How these were to be procured, Snowball did not say. This is another one of the difficult thing about revolutions, right? Is that the work has already become harder, right? The work is already difficult. They're already bringing in a harvest faster than they ever have. They've already had to sacrifice the apples and the milk. They're already feeling tired and drained. And now you're saying there's this big, complicated project, right? Uh, it's really difficult, and it brings me back to this idea of like what it would be like to be one of the slaves that wants to revolt against the master, right? I mean, what would it be like to wake up slaves who are exhausted from doing the day's work and say, hey, it's time to run north. It's time to actually like, you know s- they're already exhausted. And shout out to Snowball. But he maintained that it could be done in a year. And thereafter he declared so much labor would be saved that the animals would only need to work 3 days a week. Napoleon, on the other hand, argued that the great need of the moment was to increase food production, and that if they wasted time on the windmill, they would all starve to death. The animals formed themselves into two factions under the slogans "Vote for Snowball and the 3 Day Week" and "Vote for Napoleon and the Full Manger." So we have less work versus more food, right? You see how everything becomes an oversimplified slogan? Benjamin, you guys remember Benjamin? We should create a Benjamin emoji. I don't know if there's a donkey emoji. I mean, there has to be, right? There's an everything emoji, right? But we should find out, if there's an emoji for Benjamin. 'Cause Benjamin is somebody who I would have stayed very close to throughout this entire process. Um, Benjamin was the only animal who did not side with either faction. Is that the Benjamin emoji? What is that? If you guys found a Benjamin emoji, you guys are goaded. That might be Benjamin. I don't know what that is. Benjamin for president. I don't know about that. Benjamin is pretty jaded. Benjamin refused to believe either that food would become more plentiful or that the windmill would save work. Windmill or no windmill, he said, life will go on as it always has gone. That is, badly. Isn't Eeyore a donkey? Benjamin reminds me of Eeyore. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Uh, what do you think Benjamin means by this? Windmill or no windmill, he said, life will go on as it always has gone. That is, badly. Is he correct about that? Or is he just so shaded that he's missing out on the brilliance of Snowball? I mean, I don't know. It's been just as long, guys, since I read Animal Farm as you guys. That's the reason I'm so excited about this project. I am not reading ahead. The most that I will read ahead is the chapter that I'm preparing for, right? Namely, this one. Um, Liliana says he's jaded. He's been through it. choosing between two evils. But is Snowball evil? I mean, from this point, I mean, I'm imagining I'm an animal in the farm now. And I'm like, okay, I kind of trust Snowball. He put himself in harm's way. He actually bled for us. And he's telling us that we need to learn how to read and having fun making this project to where we can get some electricity and heat in the wintertime. Do you guys trust Snowball or no? It's like, no pigs. I think Eeyore is more sad than cynical. Yeah, that's true. That's fair. Yeah. I wonder if there's, any I wonder if there's any correlation with why they went with a sad Eeyore, if Benjamin was an inspiration for that. But um here's something to think about with respect to what Benjamin is saying here. Because Benjamin is saying windmill or no windmill, life will go on as it always has. That is badly, right? Um, Listen, the pigs have more apples and milk than they can possibly want, right? They have an entire orchard full of apples. This orchard that used to feed every single animal sufficiently, all of that goes to the pigs. The milk that used to not only feed the manor farm, but was likely sold throughout the county, now is all concentrated with the pigs. Remember, the pigs have all the milk and all the apples, all of them. So Benjamin's point is probably like, you think that if we can produce more, they're not just going to take more? Benjamin is brilliant. Benjamin is like, look, dude, they already have more apples than the whole farm could eat. They already have more milk than the whole cow. He's like, this farm used to actually be productive and bring in income, and they're taking all of it. They're taking everything. So you think if we can actually work harder and achieve more, they'll finally start giving us some? Guys, that's not how corruption works. You'll never get some. Uh, and I think that's really deep. And I think that might be what Benjamin is trying to say here. Apart from the disputes over the windmill, there was the question of the defense of the farm. It was fully realized that though the human beings had been defeated in the Battle of Cowshed, they might make another and more determined attempt to recapture the farm and reinstate Mr. Jones. They had all the more reason for doing so because the news of their defeat had spread across the countryside and made the animals on the neighboring farms more restive than ever. As usual, Snowball and Napoleon were in disagreement. According to Napoleon, what the animals must do was to procure firearms and train themselves in the use of them. According to Snowball, they must send out more and more pigeons and stir up rebellion. Now, guys, this was a literal dispute between Stalin and Trotsky. At least I believe. Fact check everything. Take what I say with a grain of salt. I like history, but I'm not like a history buff. I do know that one of the reasons why the utopia, is like one of the excuses of Stalin for why people weren't, accessing the utopia that was promised is because look, Russia is surrounded by all of her enemies. If there's anything we need to focus on, it's guns. It's guns, it's tanks, it's weapons, right? That's what we need to spend all of our money producing, according to Stalin. And Napoleon represents Joseph Stalin in this story. So, um, the one argued that if they could not defend themselves, they were bound to be conquered. The other argued that if rebellions happened everywhere, they would have no need to defend themselves. The animals listened first to Napoleon, then to Snowball, and could not make up their minds which was right. Indeed, they always found themselves in agreement with the one who was speaking at the moment. What do you guys think that the animals are out of touch with, such that they're listening to whoever the speaker is? Is it critical thinking skills? Like, what is the warning about George Orwell? Because it seems like he continues bringing up how dumb the animals are, how easily they're deceived. Is he trying to engender in us an attitude of skepticism? Like, what are the animals out of touch with? Like judgment and critical thought? Is he talking about being a part of a crowd, because crowds are susceptible to a lot of nonsense. You know, a giant crowd is just like it develops its own mind. It becomes like this whole other thing. Liliana says easily led, mob rule. They can't think for themselves, social conformity. They disregard their own capacity for thought. For sure. Groupthink. It's another one. Um, at last the day came when Snowball's plans were completed. At the meeting on the following Sunday, the question of whether or not to begin work on the windmill was to be put to the vote. There we go. This is going to be like the second vote we've seen. When the animals had assembled in the big barn, Snowball stood up and, though occasionally interrupted by bleating from the sheep, set forth his reasons for advocating the building of the windmill. Then Napoleon stood up to reply. He said very quietly that the windmill was nonsense and that he advised nobody to vote for it, and promptly sat down again. He had spoken for barely 30 seconds and seemed almost indifferent as to the effect it produced. That's spooky. Why is Napoleon not arguing like he usually does with uh, Snowball? Usually there's this epic throwdown where both of them are arguing with each other. Snowball brings a point, Napoleon brings a point, they get frustrated, they disagree a lot. That's the nature of things. At this point, Napoleon just like, um, he just stands up and quietly says, "The windmill is nonsense, and I advise nobody to vote for it." And then he just sits down. So, um, when someone who's always bickering goes silent, you might want to be spooked. It might mean that they're moving to alternative plans. It might mean that they're kind of tired of arguing with you, right? Especially someone like Napoleon, who has already seized a lot of power that he has no interest in giving up. Um, at this, Snowball sprang to his feet and, shouting down the sheep, who had begun bleating again, broke into a passionate appeal in favor of the windmill. Until now, the animals had been about equally divided in their sympathies, but in a moment, Snowball's eloquence had carried them away. In glowing sentences, he painted a picture of Animal Farm as it might be when sordid labor was lifted from the animals' backs. His imagination had now run far beyond chaff cutters and turnip slicers. Electricity, he said, could operate threshing machines, plows, harrows, rollers, and reapers and binders, besides supplying every stall with its own electric light, hot and cold water, and an electric heater. By the time he had finished speaking, there was no doubt as to which way the vote would go. Guys, one of the most brilliant things that you can use in your own personal life to effectively communicate is tap into perspectival knowing. Jump into someone else's perspective. He's talking about heaters, which are going to help the stalls. He's talking about things that are going to help animals that are not pigs, right? He's going to say, I know what you're going through, and this is going to help you in this way. And I know what you're going through, and this is going to help you in this way. In ecology of practice, anyone on this stream right now is interested, and there's 90 of us. First of all, I appreciate your open, curious attention for this long. But if anyone is interested in a practice for developing perspectival knowing, take a narrative and try to see that narrative from from a side that the writer doesn't want you to see. Like I did this with David and Goliath. I studied Goliath. I studied the Philistines, and I was like, what did this look like from Goliath's perspective? What would his story have been if he was allowed to tell it? Doing things like that. And there's a lot of practices that can kind of help you see, you know, what someone else is going through and see someone else's perspective. But yeah, of course, he wins them over. There was no doubt as to which way the vote would go. But just at this moment, Napoleon stood up and, casting a peculiar sidelong look at Snowball, uttered a high pitched whimper of a kind no one ever heard him utter before. At this, there was a terrible baying sound outside, and 9 enormous dogs, wearing brass strutted collars, came bounding into the barn. They dashed straight for Snowball, who only sprang from his place just in time to escape their snapping jaws. In a moment, he was out of the door, and they were after him. Too amazed and frightened to speak, all the animals crowded through the door to watch the chase. Guys, there it is. Absolutely. The dogs. Remember a couple of chapters back, Napoleon took those puppies and said, "Don't worry, I'll raise them. Just trust me. I'll raise them. I'm the smartest one, right? I'm the smartest one here. You should be honored to have me raise them. It's not that I want to raise them. That's hard work, right? I need all your apples and all your milk, because all the brain work that it takes me to run the farm. All of that manipulation has now led to these puppies being reasonably sized dogs that work exclusively for Napoleon. One of the things to think about here with these dogs now chasing Snowball away and this total power grab by Napoleon is right now, right at this moment, is a perfect time to attack and arrest Napoleon. If there's any time to arrest Napoleon, it's right now where all of his dogs are chasing Snowball. If you ever want your freedom again, right? If you don't want to live under the dictatorship of these vicious dogs who serve Napoleon, now is the time to act. Now is not the time to go outside the barn and watch the dogs chasing Snowball in this terrified stupor, right? If there's any time where Napoleon is vulnerable, it's right now. This is the time to speak up. This is the time to do something. So they're watching the chase. Orwell was a fantastic writer. Stuart, I completely agree. Um, Dia says no one will dare. I'm not saying I would. I'm saying somebody should. Respectfully. Apples and milk. Snowball was racing across the long pasture that led to the road. He was running as only a pig can run, but the dogs were close on his heels. Suddenly, he slipped, and it seemed certain that they had him. Then he was up again, running faster than ever. Then the dogs were gaining on him again. One of them all but closed his jaws on Snowball's tail, but Snowball whisked it free just in time. Then he put on an extra spurt, and with a few inches to spare, slipped through a hole in the hedge and was seen no more. Silent and terrified, the animals crept back into the barn. In a moment, the dogs came bounding back. At first, no one had been able to imagine where these creatures came from, but the problem was soon solved. They were the puppies whom Napoleon had taken away from their mothers and reared privately. I wonder if you can imagine, guys, a time where your silence revisited you, right? A time where your omission of the truth came back to haunt you. I mean, just keep that in your mind, right? I mean, he's saying like, look, when this kind of stuff is going on, your silence has very serious consequences that are going to visit you at a time where you least expect. Everyone just decided to stay silent about Napoleon's strong move about the puppies a couple chapters back. And we had a conversation then. I was like, why is no one speaking? Why is no one speaking up? You just assume, oh, everything's okay. We're all on the same side. We're all brothers, right, comrade? Yeah. Though not yet full grown, they were huge dogs and as fierce looking as wolves. They kept close to Napoleon. It was noticed that they wagged their tails to him in the same way as the other dogs had been used to do to Mr. Jones. Napoleon just wants to be Mr. Jones. Napoleon, with the dogs following him, now mounted onto the raised portion of the floor where Major had previously stood to deliver his speech. He announced that from now on the Sunday morning meetings would come to an end. They were unnecessary, he said, and wasted time. In future, all questions relating to the working of the farm would be settled by a special committee of pigs. Guys, what makes this committee so special? It's like you ask the question. Wait, who decides on our future from now on? Don't worry about it. It's a special committee. You see how the platitudes just increase? Platitudes are meaningless statements that are just meant to sound important. Don't worry about it. It's a special committee. No, no, no. We've assigned the milk to a special committee. No, no, no. There's a special committee for the apples. Don't worry about your children. There's a special committee. Guys, right? Um, Another thing to think about regarding these dogs, we have to always remember that there's a parallel being drawn. Orwell wants us to see Animal Farm as symbolic of the revolution in Russia. There is a heartbreaking book called The Gulag Archipelago by an author called Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago is a mouthful. But in this book, he was actually a prisoner in a Russian gulag. And he talks in this book about how it all started. And it started with people telling on each other. Like children would tell on their parents and get them arrested. Same thing happened in Nazi Germany, right? People who were supposed to be your family would just tell on you. And I think that is what these wolves represent. These wolves represent that now those who used to be your family, those who used to be your kin, are now turning inward on you. They're turning on you uh, because they themselves have been manipulated by power. That's a lot. So there's a special committee of pigs that are going to presided over by himself, presided over by Napoleon. These would meet in private and afterwards communicate their decisions to the others. The animals would still assemble on Sunday mornings to salute the flag, sing Beasts of England, and receive their orders for the week. But there would be no more debates. Wow. Isn't it funny how, like, what used to be done in pride is now just a series of alliance tests? It's like, now whenever we're in the barn, I'm just going to test to see if you still have your allegiance to me. It used to be a pride thing. It's like, oh, we sing the Beast of Burden because we're proud. We salute the flag because we're proud. And then slowly but surely, it's like, yeah, you're no longer proud, but I still need to see that you're in allegiance to this thing that I'm doing. Hmm. In spite of the shock that Snowball's expulsion had given them, the animals were dismayed by this announcement. Several of them would have protested if they could have found the right arguments. Even Boxer was vaguely troubled. He set his ears back, shook his forelock several times, and tried hard to marshal his thoughts. But in the end, he could not think of anything to say. Some of the pigs themselves, however, were more articulate. Four young porkers in the front row uttered shrill squeals of disapproval, and all four of them sprang to their feet and began speaking at once. But suddenly, the dogs sitting round Napoleon let out deep, menacing growls, and the pigs fell silent and sat down again. Hmm. You cannot choose, can you, when to stand up, right? It's like if you're willing to forgive an evil or not speak. I think it was Martin Luther King who said, um, "We will not remember the evils of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." We won't remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. That was the quote. Um, Guys, silence is consequential. This entire chapter is about the results of chapter two, right? Silence, just being quiet for so long, not saying things when you should. Now they want to say things, But at this point, saying things is equivalent to silence, right? When you've given up that much ground. The sheep then broke out into a tremendous bleating of four legs good, two legs bad, which went on for nearly a quarter of an hour and put an end to any chance of discussion. Yeah, and so it seems like, guys, the only chance at safety is to join the mindless masses. Afterwards, Squealer was sent round the farm to explain the new arrangement to the others. Comrades, he said, I trust that every animal here appreciates the sacrifice that Comrade Napoleon has made in taking this extra labor upon himself. Do not imagine, comrades, that leadership is a pleasure. On the contrary, it's a deep and heavy responsibility. No one believes more firmly than Comrade Napoleon that all animals are equal. He would be only too happy to let you make your own decisions and decide for yourselves. But sometimes you might make the wrong decisions, comrades. And then where should we be? You see the strength of the propaganda arm? They're essentially saying, I would let you choose, but then you might choose. I don't want you to choose. I just, Oh, guys, it's so intense. It's so funny how this song just I'm not song, how this book just kind of lives and breathes. It's like this book is like begging to be read in this day and age, isn't it? Suppose you had decided to follow Snowball with his moonshine of windmills. Snowball, who, as we now know, was no better than a criminal. Snowball was no better than a criminal? How? This is the beginning of like historical revisionism. They're just going to kind of rewrite history for you. Guys, those of you who recommended 1984 after this book were absolutely right. This will transition. It'll almost be like we're reading the same book. And this is a perfect preface to it. Going into 1984, we'll be so prepared for it listening to this. Um, okay, so after Squealer calls Napoleon a criminal, um, someone says he fought bravely at the Battle of Cowshed. Said somebody. You see how they're speaking up now? When you're really scared, when you're really backed into a corner, when something tells you, hey, with the new conditions, you're definitely not safe. All of a sudden, everybody wants to speak up. When things were easy, speaking up was easy. But it was also, whatever. That's their problem. I'm not going to get involved. And now it's all too late. Someone says he fought bravely at the Battle of Cowshed. Bravery is not enough, said Squealer. Loyalty and obedience are more important. And as to the Battle of the Cowshed, I believe the time will come when we shall find that Snowball's part in it was much exaggerated. The time will come, right? Yeesh. That sounds like a threat, right? You need to start remembering things the right way. Discipline, comrades, iron discipline. That is the watchword for today. One false step and our enemies would be upon us. Surely, comrades, you do not want Jones back. So now they not only have the physical threat of the dogs, they have the psychological threat of Jones. It's like Jones bad. Jones is just it's a symbol now. They already have Jones. They already have the spirit of Jones existing in Napoleon. Right? It's like, who cares if it's a human being or a pig? The way of being is identical, or maybe worse with under Napoleon, right? With Napoleon, they're under serious threat. Um, so yeah, still, Jones is a threat somehow. Once again, this argument was unanswerable. Certainly, the animals did not want Jones back. If the holding of debates on Sunday mornings was liable to bring him back, then the debates must stop. Boxer, who had now had time to think things over, voiced the general feeling by saying, if Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right. And from then on, he adopted the maxim Napoleon is always right, in addition to his private motto of I will work harder. Hmm. You know what the saddest thing is about Boxer saying this, saying Napoleon is always right? Boxer really is their only hope against these dogs. You know how strong Boxer is? It said Boxer has the strength of like 3 horses, especially since the revolution. He's working his the whole work of the farm is on his back. During the Battle of Cowshed, he knocked a guy out and thought that he killed him, right? There's no one stronger than Boxer. So I think one of the most tragic things about this chapter is that the only hope for a reversal of what's happened would be for Boxer to tap into his intuition and to say, "Yeah, I'm not having this." Because you're not going to overpower Boxer, right? Um yeah, all of these missed opportunities. I think Orwell is trying to show us in this chapter, look at all the opportunities that you're missing as you head toward tyranny. By this time, the weather had broken and the spring plowing had begun. The shed where Snowball had drawn his plans of the windmill had been shut up, and it was assumed that the plans had been rubbed off the floor. Every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, the animals assembled in the big barn to receive their orders for the week. The skull of old Major, now clean of flesh, had been disinterred from the orchard and set up on a stump at the foot of the flagstaff. Guys, they dug up old Major's skull. Okay, uh, so the skull of old Major, now clean of flesh, had been disinterred from the orchard and set up on a stump at the foot of the flagstaff beside the gun. After the hoisting of the flag, the animals were required to file past the skull in a reverent manner before entering the barn. So now they're being required to file past this skull in a reverent manner before entering the barn. What does the skull represent? Why do they have to march past this skull? I feel like it's a double manipulation because not only is it an image of death, a skull is a reminder of you can die. Like you're closer to death than you think. It's a threat for sure. But it's also an emotional manipulation because they loved old Major. So setting up that skull and having people forced to file past it is like saying, "You owe me your love and I will kill you." I don't mean to laugh at this. This is freaking scary. It's this is really really deep. It's a master manipulation in two forms. You have this skull of someone who is, who meant a lot to you, and it's saying, "Yeah, I will kill you, and I want whenever you pass this thing, I want you to have love for what this person represented. I want you to stay the course." Nowadays, they did not sit all together as they had done in the past. Napoleon, with Squealer and another pig named Minimus, who had a remarkable gift for composing songs and poems, sat on the front of the raised platform, with the 9 young dogs forming a semicircle round them, and the other pigs sitting behind. The rest of the animals sat facing them in the main body of the barn. Napoleon read out the orders for the week in a gruff, soldierly style, and after a single singing of Beasts of England, all the animals dispersed. Hmm. You guys remember they would sing Beast of England over and over and over? They would sing it whenever they had the chance. The sound was just everywhere. People would sing it while they were working. The birds would chirp it, and you know everyone just was down with this Beast of England thing. You're now down to one chant of Beast of England. Remember, Old Major heard Beast of England in his dream. This is a song about utopia. This is a song about what it's going to be like when everything is beautiful and when the humans are out of the way. And now Napoleon's like, "Oh, no, we'll just sing it once, just so that we can maybe phase it out." The joy is gone. Yeah, Chanty, I agree. On the 3rd Sunday after Snowball's expulsion, the animals were somewhat surprised to hear Napoleon announce that the windmill was to be built after all. Why would Napoleon want to build the windmill? Guys, we're almost done. We only have 2 more paragraphs. I want to put this to you. Why does Napoleon want to build the windmill now? And the hint, I think, has a lot to do with Julius Caesar. Remember Snowball read Julius Caesar? He got it out of the farmhouse. There's a correlation between Julius Caesar, the book, and this windmill thing. Uh, OKC says because he can capitalize on it somehow. Absolutely. Absolutely, he can. He wants the glory, says Liliana. Okay, yeah. Shanti says he wants to be the hero. Um, at this point, it's too late to matter. He has control. I agree. Was never about the windmill strategy. A lot of, So here's what I'm thinking, and tell me if this makes sense. You remember Julius Caesar, that book was in the barn house. And Jones read that book just to have some historical knowledge, right? Jones wasn't, planning to form any rebellion. He just owned this farm and he just got drunk and he just owned that book. So maybe it was just a decoration. But Snowball had an entirely different strategy for corresponding with that book, didn't he? He won the Battle of Cowshed reading that book and enacting the strategies in that book. So Snowball's intention for the windmill is different than Napoleon's intention, right? Snowball wanted the windmill to actually lift these animals out of poverty and lift them, into this utopia that's encapsulated in that song "Beast of England." Napoleon's plans for the windmill, if that windmill is running, guys, every animal is expendable, right? You simply become a number. If he can run the farm by himself, then he can choose. It's like right now you need all these animals. You can't kill all of them. You can't. So the dogs are not as useful right now. They're just a threat. I mean, think about that. You need the bodies to work. Who's going to work? Napoleon? It's all we've already been told. Napoleon doesn't work. So in order to actually run the farm, he needs all the animals. But when that windmill is running, it's like he's thinking, okay, well, Snowball has something going here. Snowball is saying if we can get this thing running, you know, then a lot of people become expendable. And if people are expendable, then that puts more power in my hands. Napoleon is after power at the end of the day. Stewart said Napoleon is trying to be just like Mr. Jones. Absolutely. Guys, the spirit of Mr. Jones runs through this story. Mr. Jones never left. That's a scary thing, right? Mr. Jones never left. Behind every human being, there's a way of being, right? Behind every object, there's a process, right? um, really interesting. The windmill's to be built after all. He did not give any reason for having changed his mind. Of course not. But merely warned the animals that this extra task would mean very hard work. It might even be necessary to reduce their rations. So he's saying more work for you and less food for you. Isn't that the opposite of the argument that he used when he took the apples and the milk? When he said they need all the apples and they need all the milk, wasn't the excuse that we're going to be working so hard? So why does it make sense now to say you guys are going to be working really, really hard? And by the way, we're also reducing the rations. Yikes. The plans, however, had all been prepared down to the last detail. A special committee of pigs had been at work upon them for the past 3 weeks. Guys, get used to this. Get used to this phrase, special committee. It's just seeped in secrecy. Don't worry about it. It's a special committee. The building of the windmill with various other improvements was expected to take 2 years. That evening, Squealer explained privately to the other animals that Napoleon had never in reality opposed the windmill. On the contrary, it was he who had advocated it in the beginning, and the plan which Snowball had drawn on the floor of the incubator shed had actually been stolen from among Napoleon's papers. The windmill was, in fact, Napoleon's own creation. Why then ask somebody he had spoken so strongly against it? Why then ask somebody had he spoken so strongly against it? Here Squealer looked very sly. That, he said, was Comrade Napoleon's cunning. He had seemed to oppose the windmill simply as a maneuver to get rid of Snowball, who was a dangerous character and a bad influence. Now that Snowball was out of the way, the plan could go forward without his interference. You guys remember the Grinch when the Grinch was trying to explain to Cindy Lou Who what he was doing in the house? It's like, this light has a light that won't light on one side. I'll take it up there and I'll bring it back here. you, you remember watching the Grinch? This explanation just sounds like so contrived. It's so made up. Uh, Why then, asked somebody, had he spoken so strongly against it? Here Squealer looked very sly. He said that Comrade Napoleon's cunning. He had seemed to oppose the windmill simply as a maneuver to get rid of Snowball, who was a dangerous character and a bad influence. Now that Snowball was out of the way, the plan could go forward without his interference. This, said Squealer, was something called tactics. He repeated a number of times. Tactics, comrades, tactics. Skipping round and whisking his tail with a merry laugh. The animals were not certain what the word meant, but Squealer spoke it so persuasively, and the three dogs who happened to be with him growled so threateningly. Remember, not only is there a psychological component, the persuasiveness, but there's also now a physical component. Now, not only is there that psychological imperative, there's a biological imperative. There's a safety imperative. Uh, so they growled so threateningly that they accepted his explanation without further question. That's the end of chapter 5. Tactics, comrades. Tactics. Don't worry about it. It's tactics. Don't worry about what Napoleon did. Guys, it's just tactics. He was using tactics. Of course, it's just tactics. It's like, well then who's deciding who gets. Don't worry about it. It's a special committee, right? Yeesh. These are called platitudes. Hang on one second. Dang it. In my rush to get down here because I was late, I left my phone upstairs. Can someone look up the word platitude? I was just about to ask the oracle and have it explained live. Look up the word platitudes and post that in the chat. What is a platitude? Platitude. Okay, Jolie says it's a trite or banal remark or statement, especially one expressed as if it were original or significant. Synonym cliche. Joanne has a definition: a remark or statement, especially one with a moral content that has been used too often to be interesting or thoughtful. Another one says a remark or statement, especially one with a moral content that has been used too often to be interesting or thoughtful. When I think about platitudes, I think about political platitudes, like "Let's be strong," or "Let's hold hands and walk forward," or you know, the stars and there's just they have no meaning. It's not real content. It's not like a policy. When you see a politician, you want a policy. What are you actually going to do for my life and the lives of the people in my sphere of influence? What are you going to do for the county? What are you going to do for this state and this city? What are you going to do for the other side, for the people who don't agree with you? Why don't they agree with you? Address the actual issues. And instead, sometimes it's like you know, Liliana says, "Make America Great Again." MAGA is a platitude, right? Now, some people, of course, are going to say, "Well, you got to dig into it for deeper meaning," if that's there. But yeah, sometimes it's just something that's thrown out there that just sounds flowery. And Socrates discovered platitudes among the sophists. So Socrates in Athens, he would walk around and he found the natural philosophers, who today we would call scientists. Um, and he found that they had a lot of facts. They had a lot of true things. But he's like, okay, you have truth, but how are these truths relevant to my life? You're talking about whether holes exist, or whether they're just whether these things have ontological status and the rest of it. But how now shall we live? What does that mean for my life? Like, why do I care about this series of facts that you discovered if they're empty of relevance? But then he met the sophists and figured out that they cared about relevance more than they cared about truth. So all they would do is just pamper everything in flowery language. They would write speeches for the politicians in Athens, and they would write for both sides. It's like, I don't care. I don't care what the truth is. I'm going to give you a speech. I'll write you a speech. You pay me. Just fill it with flowery language, and people will be very impressed. Right. And I think that's where platitudes came from. Just like, just say things that people like, and then people will like you. And then under the platitudes, you can hide your real intentions. So yeah, just something to think about. I think I might have went too far on platitudes. Guys, thank you so much for being here, for allowing me to be a recipient of your open, curious attention. I think that the the currency of love is open, curious attention. And so I feel that. Thank you so much. Thank you for the apples and the milk, everyone. Apples and milk. I told you I need it. I need it because I'm struggling so hard to build this farm. It is my right. The apples and milk emojis must come through. Thank you guys so much. That was an amazing chapter, Mel. I completely agree. Um, let's see, 1 second. Guys, thank you so much for the super chats. All the new members, all the new Insight members, welcome. We're going to be doing a lot of cool things next week. I'm planning on, getting the Discord going so that we can have discussions, like post chapter discussions as we go through books. So look forward to that. Lauren with a super chat said, "Happy Friday." Happy Friday. I don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm so blessed that it's Friday. It is my Friday for sure. 1984, let's go. Man, that is going to be a journey. 1984 is about to be crazy, right? Are you guys going to be here for that? You guys going to be here for 1984? OKD says, "Here's some milk money." I wonder if you guys are going to be here for the milk merch. We're going to do milk and apples is definitely going to be a part of the merch. It'll be a conversation starter. Mel Peterson, I deeply appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for being a subscriber and a member. OIS doesn't support gifting subs. Anyway, my 2 cents. Thank you, John. John is a day one. Love you, man. Heather McGonigal. Heather McGonigal. You are the best at what you do. Heck, maybe the only one that does what you do. I'm so grateful for you. Guys, I had no idea that there was a legitimate nerd community out there. We're about to do great things because this doesn't make me bored. It energizes me. This kind of stuff gives me energy. I thought that it would take forever to build a community even this big. Like 89 people in the chat right now. We got up to like 95 during the chapter. This is truly bizarre. I am more than blown away and humbled by your presence here. So I deeply appreciate it. Kat says, "Here's my tax for being late." Apples and milk. Yeah, if anyone is late, and the thing is, I owe apples and milk. I was 2 to 3 minutes late here. John said, "I forgot you're in the US. Forgot to tip and taxes." Thank you very much. You guys are lit. 10 gift memberships, 5 more gift memberships from Renegades United and Phantom. Guys, I deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate it. I can't even express to you how much. Um, and man, it's like I'm so excited over this book club that I'm wondering what's even after 1984. Like I just want to get started, you know. But this is chapter 6 and 7 will be next week. Then the following week will be, I think the following week we'll just do 8, 9, and 10. The book is only 10 chapters. So within the next 2 weeks, we are going to finish Animal Farm. So Animal Farm is going to be done in 2 weeks. We're racing through this book. It's a relatively short one. 1984, I think, is a bit longer. Joanne says, I feel energized by these two. Really appreciate this wisdom and broadening my mind. Guys, it's off the chain. I love it. Mel says, can we do all the books we voted on? That would be interesting. I mean, I would love to do all those books, but then at the same time, it's a little bit unfair, I guess, that all of them were my personal recommendations besides 1984. Um, I wonder if there is, I wonder if there's a way to like get the consensus on what should come after 1984 because 1984 was so it was overwhelming. You know, when I asked in the last chat, like, what should the next book? 1984 was just a matter of course. Like, psh. I would like to do, and maybe this is just me being a horror fan, because there's kind of a subtle difference between dystopian literature and actual horror, right? I would like to read Conspiracy Against the Human Race. That book's crazy. Consensus can vote on Discord. Absolutely. So you know what? Uh, I really like that idea, and I think that I just have to dedicate more time and energy on making sure that the Discord is available by next week. So that's going to be important. Carol Good said, "Handmaid's Tale." Handmaid's Tale is a book. I didn't know Handmaid's Tale was a book. I thought that was a show. Whoa. Handmaid's Tale might be a crazy book. That might be really interesting too. Wow. Kat says it was written in the 80s. Ooh, that is a crazy one. I bet you, man, because that show was hard to watch. I bet the book is like brutal. Slaughterhouse-Five. There's been a lot of requests for Slaughterhouse-Five. Hang on. I'm looking this up immediately. Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Slaughterhouse-Five is a 1969 semi-autobiographic science fiction infused anti-war novel by Kurt Vonnegut. It follows the life experiences of Billy Pilgrim from his early years to his time as an American soldier and chaplain's assistant during World War II to the post-war years. Throughout the novel, Billy frequently travels back and forth through time. The protagonist deals with a temporal crisis as a result of his post-war psychological trauma. The text centers on Billy's rapture by the German army and his survival of the Allied firebombing of Dresden and a prisoner of war, an expertise that Vonnegut endured as an American serviceman. Wow, the work has been called an example of unmatched moral clarity and one of the most enduring anti war novels of all time. Man, you guys want to go deep. Jennifer B, thank you so much. Jennifer B says, thanks, Mr. B. I love this book club. This book club loves you as long as you sacrifice all of your apples and all of your milk because I need it. The Picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde. I've heard of The Picture of Dorian Gray. Cosmic Vagabond says, the deeper, the better. Guys, the cascade of insights is indeed infinite. Do you guys understand that all of the insights that we've picked up from chapter 1 to chapter 6, If we decided to just start over and not do chapter say, if we decided to just start over to go to chapter 1, we would unpack insights that we hadn't picked up from that. It's forever. And it's so amazing to have a channel dedicated to just the that's what this channel is dedicated to, that experience. Because I feel like that feeling, that experience is like the coolest experience the universe has to offer. Those moments where, right? Aha. Uh, and think about the etymology of the word insight, right? It's insight. You're no longer ignoring it. So the reason it feels so good is because the truth was under your nose. It was already there. It's not as if your mind got some new information. You just stopped ignoring what was right in front of you the whole time. That's oh, right. Such a cool thing to have a channel dedicated to that with this many people this early. Amazing. Uh, Yikes. Now it's 2:33 and I'm late for something else. Today has been a very, very bad day for me scheduling wise. Love you guys. Thanks so much for being here. And I kind of got to shut this down too so that the Animal Farm thing doesn't become too long for those who have to watch it back. Love you guys. Thanks so much.